Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome out to tonight's weekly training webinar. I'm Ferre. I'm here with Steve Swenson, and we appreciate you coming and joining us.
Yeah, exactly. We ended up missing last week because we had that flu that's been going around, but feeling better and getting over it now.
Yeah, it is. It's nice to be past that. If you're new to the webinars, which we get new people that join us sometimes, we hold these webinars every single week, every Wednesday night. They're generally at the same time. You know, we hold them at 7 o'clock Mountain Time, which is 6 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Eastern. And we're always going to try to send out a link beforehand, registration link that you can use to register for that webinar. You can also register for it on the website under registration. We're also happy to take requests. If you have any topics, things you'd like us to talk about or cover, and if you do have anything that we need to look at, I mean, if it's a basic question, you can always get a hold of us by email pretty fast. If it's something that we need to schedule a time to talk, just send us an email and we'll figure out when that will work. And if you need help with a property, something that you're evaluating, see if you can gather all the information and send it to us by way of email so that we can kind of get out there in front of us and be able to look at it that way. But we're always happy to do that.
Yeah, exactly. The more information, like the parcel number, the county website that you can provide for us, makes it that much easier for us to go through and quickly review the properties and let you know what we think before you do the first deal.
Yeah, we're always happy to do that too. I think part of the problem people have sometimes in the beginning with pulling the trigger is just not trusting their instincts with it because it's something new. And so it helps sometimes to have the affirmation of somebody else to say it looks good.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're going to be talking about a number of different topics, but they're really related to monetizing your investments. It's really what we're going to be talking about is how you go from making the investment, which I'm sure some of you have already bought stuff, and if you haven't bought stuff, then you may find once you actually go through and buy it that it's not as hard as it might seem. We tend to build it up into more than what it might be, but monetizing the investment is an important aspect that gets overlooked all the time, and it's just as important as how you buy, if not even more important in a lot of ways. So it's something you've got to be thinking about right from the beginning when you go to invest. You have to think about how exactly you want to make the money and what works for you based on your resources. So there are a number of things you're going to consider if we're talking about buying real estate. If we're talking about acquiring land, you have to have an exit strategy. You don't have to have an exit strategy with liens because they have their own exit strategy, which is redemption. You get a check in the mail. That is your exit strategy with liens, unless you want to reinvest that money. But with tax deeds, you really have to have a plan or a strategy in place in order to monetize that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point you bring up with tax liens. Really, there's only one strategy until you get to the point of redemption, and that is just them redeeming. And then the only other strategy past redemption period is foreclosing, and so it's a pretty easy strategy. You know exactly what you need to do to acquire the property. And so when it comes to tax deed investing, we're talking about we're just talking about real property, real estate. And so just like Shade said, it's important to have the exit strategy in mind before even purchasing the property. Now that might combine a series of different types of exit strategies, but it's important to know exactly what you want to do before actually even buying the property.
Yeah, in fact, it can affect which properties are appealing to you versus which ones aren't. Oftentimes, knowing things like that can do a lot to help inform your decision about which properties you're interested in. So some of the things we're going to think about or talk about when you're looking at properties first would be your financial needs. Given the situation, do you need the money immediately or not? There are people that are working with a lot of capital, and it's not a problem for them if they sit on money for 6 months or whatever time period that might be. But if you're starting out with $5,000 capital, then you need something that's going to turn around quickly. You need the ability to buy low, sell high, and repeat that process. So you want that cycle to be down to as little time as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're considering that, say you have $5,000 to invest, well, based on your exit strategy, if you don't have a ton of time, then you're probably not going to want to invest in a single family home. It's maybe going to take some rehab and some work and different things to get it up to the point of either renting it out or turning around and flipping the property. Then you may want to focus on something like land that you could flip in a shorter period of time. So all of those different types of things come into play when you're looking at a specific investment.
Yeah, in fact, when it comes to strategies for certain types of land, that's a question you have to ask yourself as well when you're looking at property is what works best for this type of property. And you may find yourself drawn to certain types of properties because they work best for a specific strategy. But the other consideration though is what your long-term goals and objectives are. What is you're trying to accomplish here, and how can this exit strategy help you move towards that? Is really what the considerations are that you're going to think about. Something else that we want to consider is the time frames. Okay, whenever we're talking about time frames, exit strategies generally are going to fall under one of three time frames. It's either an immediate flip, it's a short-term strategy, meaning it's less than a year, or it's a long-term strategy, meaning that it's more than a year. We use this system here to basically say, all right, flipping the property is something that can happen relatively quickly, but we're going to give you 0 to 3 months of time to be able to complete that process, which is completely doable, as long as you've got everything that you need. But in some cases, that may not be the best thing to do. In some cases, it may work best to go with a short-term strategy, which is really about selling the property with a warranty deed. That's the difference between flipping the property and this short-term strategy is obtaining a warranty deed through quiet title action. That's going to be the major difference between the two. However, when we move over to the long-term strategy here, you're talking about holding property for more than a year. You don't even necessarily need to worry about quiet title because you're going to have it for long enough that you can probably get quiet title or get a warranty deed on it at some point anyway. Besides that, you're not selling it, so you don't have to transfer title.
Yeah, exactly. And so when we talk about, flipping the property, that's really where we're looking at wholesaling. Wholesaling the property. When we're looking at more of the long-term strategy or the short-term strategy, just like Shade said, that's where we're looking to get more top dollar with the short-term strategy and the rentals or lease options or something like that, seller financing with the long-term strategy.
Yeah, in fact, the duration is going to affect our overall sales price and what our potential profitability is going to be, and that's because there's really more capital here that we're using than just money. It's also a matter of time and the length of time, the amount of time that's required in order to do certain things. Flipping the property is basically selling a property as is. Okay, it's buying it and turning around and selling it without really doing anything to the property, without making any changes to things or anything special with title. You're basically just turning around, selling it most likely to another investor, or even if it's just somebody that wants to own the property. It still is a wholesale cash transaction.
Yeah, you're looking for regardless if it's an investor or some private buyer, essentially it's a wholesale buyer. And so, this could go for any type of land. It could even go for something like a single family home that you picked up for 25% on the dollar. You turn around and sold it for 50 cents on the dollar to the investor. And the investor goes through and does the work to sell it for top dollar. They may take it through quiet title. They may fix the property up, put money into it.
Yeah. In fact, and that works for a lot of people. A lot of people, their time is most valuable to them. They just want the ability to get in and get out. They like the, they like the fact that they can deal with cash transactions. But as the value of the property increases, so too does the potential profit. If you go to buy something like this, and in a short-term strategy where we're saying, okay, we're not necessarily going to flip the property. We're willing to sit on it for up to a year because we believe it's going to give us greater overall profit than if we were just do this within a couple of months. And the reason for that is because we believe that we can take this property through quiet title and get a warranty deed on it, so that we can sell it for a higher price. We can sell it for market value, basically. And so that's going to be the major factor here, is going through quiet title. And that's a process that can take 2 to 6 months in cases, maybe longer in some cases. But it is something that we're considering and actually need to account for the cost on before we were to do that, because really obtaining a warranty deed is the only way we can offer the property at full market value.
Yeah, and usually if we're going to use a short-term strategy, it's going to be for properties over 50,000. And then kind of the flipping strategy would generally be for properties that are valued under 50,000. Now, there could be situations where those overlap, vice versa. But either way, that kind of gives you an idea. So maybe if you're looking at a $70,000 home that you picked up for 15 grand, well, it might be worth it to go through quiet title and get top dollar for it. Fix up the property a little bit so you can get that 70,000 and make 40,000 off of it after all your investments are paid.
Yeah, I think really the best way to kind of see which one of these is going to work is to run some of the numbers on different properties and figure out about what your overall profitability is going to be. A long-term strategy is really, I think, a great strategy for people to employ if they don't need that money right away, because the price you're paying for this property is going to be the absolute lowest possible price if anybody can pick it up for. And hanging on to it for longer really only ensures that a couple of things. Number one is the longer you own that property, the easier it is to get quiet title on it. But also the property is going to go up in value over time, and so the longer you own that property, the more valuable it becomes. You're able to make that money just by appreciation alone, but it also opens the door for more long-term strategies like income properties, like creating monthly residual income using properties that you retain and basically collect a lease or rent on.
Yeah, exactly. And with the long-term strategy, really, this can be used for any type of property. It doesn't need to be an over $50,000 property. I mean, you may have a $10,000 building lot that you're essentially, seller financing or, lease to buy type situation where they're paying monthly payments. That's still going to be more of a long-term strategy where you're planning on them essentially paying monthly payments over the next 2 years, and then they acquire the property. But I think this is a pretty easy way to break down the different types, between the long term, the short term, and the flip strategy, to kind of give you an idea of how it's done and how to look at it, look at each property and kind of determine where does this property fit.
Yeah, and you'll find that some will fit better for certain situations than others. For instance, you might find a nice residential building lot that is valued quite high. Let's say it's valued at $30,000, and you're able to pick it up for a good price. I guess as you look at your potential profit, that's part of what we'll tell you here. In fact, I've got some slides in a minute here that will help explain it a little bit as we're looking at some of the different options. So another question that you'll need to ask yourself, especially if what you're interested or what you're buying is property with improvements. If you're looking at property with improvements, then there's a really important question that you need to be able to answer before you ever buy it. And that is, are you better off selling the property as is, wholesale basically pricing, or are you better off rehabilitating it and selling it for market value? That's a question that can greatly impact your overall profitability on an investment and your ability to buy more.
Yeah, exactly. Some investments are going to be better off just letting another investor take on the responsibilities. But other investments, even though wholesaling is quick and efficient and is good, especially if you're getting started, is you've got more and more capital to invest. Being able to wait that extra 6 months and go through quiet title to get top dollar may get you an extra, $30,000 or $40,000 in a deal, or even more.
Yeah, in fact, specifically, if we want to know, really which one we're better off doing, a couple things that we need to know is, number one, we need to know what the wholesale value of the property is. Like, I think I did put it down there too far. No, I did. I've got some terms here that we use on things. You basically need to know the difference between the wholesale value and the market value. Okay, so wholesale value being selling the property as is, not with a warranty deed, and basically to another investor. The wholesale value is oftentimes going to be, you know, when I look at a property and think wholesale value, I normally think 50% of market value.
Yeah.
You know, that's I don't know how accurate that is compared to what other people think, but that's what usually runs through my mind.
Yeah, anywhere between, 30% to maybe 60% or somewhere like that, 70%. Maybe.
Yeah. So
usually under 50.
You know, that alone, just knowing the difference between the wholesale value and the market value will tell you a lot as to which one you should do. But the other questions you have to ask yourself are, what are the estimated repair costs? Okay, and you have to be able to do that with very little information really about the property. You want to get images of the property that are current. You want somebody there to take pictures of it and to look at it. And that's why we think it's good a lot of times to send somebody like a handyman who has some degree of experience with real estate and repairs, so that they can give you just a quick run over and say, well, you know, the roof looked good, or I can see that the house has rotting, here. When you send somebody that's an expert, they can spot out things that maybe somebody that's just taking photographs may not.
Yeah, exactly. And that cost can completely vary too, depending on location, type of property. And so one thing I just want to quickly add about that estimated repair cost is always go high. Don't go low when you're making that estimate, because the only person that's going to cost is you. And so one thing when we're looking is we're always going to take the high end of everything. That way, if it's a lot less than that, our deal is even that more profitable. But we're almost putting in extra money there for unexpected things that we don't even know about.
Yeah. In fact, you're always better off padding it on the conservative side and overestimating costs for repairs rather than underestimating. But another thing you want to consider is the time estimate to do the work. If there are things that have got to be done on the property, then rehabbing a property takes a significant amount of time, and that's part of what you need to plan for. If it's just a couple of simple things and you think you can get it done in a few months, that's great. But otherwise, you need to understand that it's probably going to take months. Let's see where I was at. And so really the question you have to ask there, another one is, are there any holding costs? That's what HC stands for, is holding costs. And holding costs are costs that you incur while you still own the property, essentially. Like, for instance, if you're going to be hanging on to the property for a year, then the property taxes are part of your holding costs, because you are going to have to pay the annual property taxes. There may be other things that are owed on the property, or things that you may need to pay.
An HOA, if there's some type of HOA, you're going to need to take that in consideration, paying that monthly HOA fee in addition. So that's going to be part of that holding cost.
Yeah, in fact, we'll show you here. I must have doubled that one. Also, anytime you're looking at rehabilitating a property, you also need to be thinking quiet title, because it's really only worth it to do a rehab on a property if you're going to obtain a warranty deed and sell the property for full market value.
That or doing tax title services.
Yeah, using a service like that,
where you're guaranteeing the title either way.
Yeah, it's really all about getting title insurance, and so tax title services is able to offer something like that instead of going through the process to get a warranty deed on the property. Now, selling the property as is going to be the quickest way, to collect a return. It's also going to offer the deepest discount. It's the one that's going to offer the cheapest price. And at the end of the day, price is what sells real estate. Price is what will ultimately attract somebody and make them pull the trigger, or have nobody interested at all. And so when you are selling property as is, you could be selling to just a regular real estate owner in the area that's buying, or you could be dealing with an investor. And the benefit or advantage of dealing with an investor is that it's a repeatable process. So if you find a buyer that is buying real estate the same way you're selling real estate, and you're able to do a deal with them, you can repeat that transaction over and over again and become quite certain about what your numbers will be and how fast you can get a transaction. That's the fastest way to turn it over, is to have a buyer lined up beforehand.
Yeah, exactly. You know, in most property, when we're talking about selling as is, we're just going to be selling it through a quitclaim deed. So essentially what we're doing is we're just, you know, selling all of our interest in the property to the property owner. And so that title isn't going to be guaranteed because it's not going to go through the quiet title process unless we've done that. And so we're just going to be essentially using the quitclaim deed system within all of the different states to transfer that title into the other property owners.
Yeah, and what a quitclaim deed does is it transfers over the ownership that you possess on the property, essentially. You know, so if you're the full owner on the property, it grants you full ownership rights, essentially. Which, lucky for us, we get our deeds directly from the county, and we know their tax deeds following a judicial foreclosure. So there are no encumbrances still attached to the property at that point, because the property's just been through foreclosure. So our ownership's absolute.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, just something I wanted to talk about briefly here is where we fall into this process here, you know, in a normal distribution network. You know, with normal distribution, you know, you've got a manufacturer who can manufacture the items, which, you know, go out to wholesalers and eventually out to retailers. It's a little bit different with real estate. And so I just wanted to add a few things here and talk about this for a second. We're in a unique position as tax sale investors, because normally when it comes to real estate, there is no manufacturer. You really only have kind of a retail market in a lot of ways, because everybody's buying and building kind of their own real estate. And the only things that normally would exist outside of that would be like lenders and banks and their bank foreclosures. You know, the ones that they offer, that might be a way that people could get property for a little bit less. But ultimately, though, that lender or the bank is still they're still the owner of the property. They still have a financial interest in the property, so it limits the kind of deal you can get. With tax sales, we get this unique opportunity because the county is foreclosing on property due to delinquent property taxes, but they're only after what's owed to them. You know, foreclosing on the property is just merely the only way they can recover that money. And so, you know, we get the opportunity to jump in to tax sales and buy directly from a county through the sale these properties that have just been foreclosed on, and it automatically puts us in the position of a wholesaler. We bought the property for less than anybody else knows how to buy it for. You know, if we've done our homework right, we've paid between 5 and 20%, you know, 25% of what the property's estimated to be worth, which is a better deal than we'll find anywhere else. And it gives us the power to be able to offer these properties either at wholesale pricing or at retail, basically at full market pricing. The choice is up to us.
Yeah, exactly. That's a pretty good way to look at it. You know, and when it comes to the wholesaler, you know, at that point we can either wholesale it to another investor, or we really can kind of do the fix up and clean up the title and sell it through kind of more like a retail, you know, where we're getting that top dollar.
Yeah, and really, both of them are profitable. You know, the primary difference between the two is that, you know, to sell it on the retail level is going to take more time and it's going to take more money investment, but you're going to sell it for a higher price. And so it's interesting how we get that choice. We also, because we're able to buy the property as cheap as we are also given the ability to operate like a lender or a bank if we want to as well. We've got all of those options there. You know, in fact, we're going to talk about them here for a second. And by the way, this is the thing I've shown you before, just when we're going to use some of these. Estimated repair cost, holding cost is the other thing we use. Then we've got wholesale value, market value, and quiet title. We kind of talked about wholesale value just a little bit, but let's make sure that people understand a few things about it. First off, we mentioned it's as is. You know, so this is going to be using most likely a quitclaim deed to transfer ownership. It doesn't require any kind of warranty deed, doesn't include a warranty deed. These are almost always done through quitclaim deed or the equivalent thereof.
Yeah, exactly. Another key point is that wholesale value is always going to be below market value. So that could range anywhere from 20% up to 70%, but it's going to be below the market value. That's the whole point of wholesale value, is that you're getting it below market value.
Yeah, in fact, the wholesale value is generally going to be the lowest price of any estimated price on the property. In other words, there really isn't a price below wholesale value. That's pretty much the cheapest price. Of course, there is, and that price is what we buy it for. But in the world of real estate, wholesale value is the cheapest the property goes, and that's basically the target market. For us, because we're getting a good deal on property, we want to pick it up for a low price so that we can wholesale it to somebody else quickly. Now, the market value, sometimes you hear us use terms like retail or market. Market value is basically just the current price that buyers are willing to pay for the property. So it's what properties like this are selling for right now.
Yeah, exactly. It's what the market is currently showing. So when we talk about assessed value, that's what the county has assessed. But the market value is going to be closer to maybe a Zillow value, but really we'll determine that market value by doing a comparative market analysis. Also, market value, when you're selling for market value, most buyers are going to require a warranty deed, the ability to get title insurance. This really is the highest amount or the top amount paid for real estate.
Yeah. This is the highest price. It's also often done through a realtor or a broker, and because of that, well, there's lots of reasons that title insurance is required, but that's the type of transaction that normally occurs here when things are sold at market value. You're dealing with warranty deeds. You've got to get full title insurance. The realtors get paid. Everybody gets their little chunk when it's sold on market value because there's more money to go around.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, another option that you have that changes, what you should do, or maybe what you may want to do, is seller financing. Seller financing gives you the ability. It's kind of a hybrid between both systems. It's a way for you to create residual monthly income. Really, seller financing has a lot of benefits, and it's only because we pay so little for the properties that it's even really an option to us. But with seller financing, some of the benefits include expanding the number of potential buyers that you have. In other words, it allows you to open up the possibility of buying to a much bigger group of people because it costs less out of pocket.
Yeah, really, to be honest, when you offer seller financing on a property, it's nearly impossible not to find a buyer. Because people, there's only a minimum amount of a down payment, so we determine what that down payment is. But maybe it's $500, maybe it's $1,000, maybe it's more than that if it's more expensive property, and then essentially monthly payments coming after that. But what that gives us the ability to do, especially if we're buying cheaper type real estate, is possibly pay for that real estate, then also start building those monthly checks coming in off of the property. And if somebody doesn't pay, it's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world. We just repeat the process.
Yeah, exactly. Some of the facts about seller financing: it does not increase your risk at all. Basically your full risk, was taken when you bought the property. Offering seller financing does nothing but make it easier to sell if you want, give you more options. It also enables you to sell the property for a higher selling price. Now, why is that? Well, because when somebody's paying full price for something, so you're selling it for $59.95, let's say, when you offer it for seller financing, your financing part of that's money they don't have to come up with out of pocket. And it's also somewhat expected that the price is higher through seller financing. So rather than it being the $59.95 cash, it might be something closer to $7,500 with seller financing, or $8,000 with seller financing.
Yeah, you're offering the property as a seller financing property, but you're giving a cash discount. So essentially, yeah, I'm offering this property through seller finance. It's $79.99. But if you'd like to buy the property straight for cash, I'll give it to you for $59.95.
Yeah, which is often how it's one of the ways that you can word the advertisements, that you post, is to be able to offer it both ways. You can offer it with seller financing by offering a set price with a cash discount. So people have the option. They know they can save a few $1,000s. If they just pay cash up front. Or they have the option to finance it, which again is appealing to some people. That seller financing makes it possible for them to purchase a property they wouldn't normally be able to obtain.
Just one last key point I think is just the ownership is not going to be transferred until the debt's paid. So once the property owner or the person that's buying the property from you is finished paying those payments, then at that time you'll go ahead and transfer the deed into their name. Yeah.
In fact, that's part of the reason why it does not increase your risk, because you're not transferring ownership until you've already collected everything that's owed on the property. So you basically are the one that will determine that. It puts you in control. It also gives you the ability to make money the same way lenders do, by borrowing. What's interesting about this, though, is you're basically able to borrow money out of thin air. You're able to buy these properties for such a low price that have a significant value. And then, you're able to borrow on that value. It's really a pretty powerful tool. And like Steve said, after the person is paid off is when you'll transfer it. It also, in some cases, may enable you to sell the same property multiple times. Meaning that if somebody fails to pay, they put down their down payment and they pay for 6 months and then they stop paying. It's really no more difficult for you. All it really does for you is mean you're going to end up selling the property again until you find another buyer. And so, it gives you the ability to make money both through the appreciation that the property has over time. Plus, it also gives you the ability to make money through monthly payments, residual income, which for a lot of people that's what they're after. It doesn't just have to be property with improvements. You can do this with raw land. You can offer seller financing with raw land and also create residual monthly income. So here's a question here. What do I need to do in order to offer owner financing or seller financing? The terms are synonymous.
Yeah, first is that you're going to obviously need the deed to the property.
Yeah, you want to you really can't sell the property until you've obtained the deed to it, and in some cases that can take 30 to 60 days for some counties after you buy. But you want to make sure you have the deed to the property. That's one thing that you want to have set up. Another thing you'll want to have set up is most likely you're going to be doing this under a business entity. And this is a good time to get that business entity set up, as well as your accompanying identification, your ITIN or your employee ID number for tax purposes, and then also to have a bank account set up that is attached to that account so you can start doing business.
Yeah, exactly. Another important thing is to have the correct sales contract, the owner's financing form for that state to make sure it's completely legal. Generally, there's going to be a lot of different examples online that you can find that you can kind of custom make or change up a bit depending on the individual deal.
Oh, don't worry, Randy. You weren't like, don't worry about it all. Also, online signature program. Once you have the correct sales contract, selling properties through seller financing is really pretty simple, especially given the way the internet works today and how accessible it is to most people. Essentially, when you have somebody that is ready to buy, what you need to have set up is a simple method for collecting payment. Okay, so for some of you, it may be a good idea to establish or set up a merchant account. Because you can get things like merchant accounts relatively easy now compared to the way it was 15 years ago. And you can get a merchant account that's not going to cost very much,
in terms of what they charge you per transaction. But there's also a lot of other options as well. There's things like Venmo and PayPal. You could also have people wire the money directly into your bank account. But I think that the idea is to try to find a way to simplify the process as much as possible, just to make it easy for your potential buyers, to make payments.
Worst case scenario, you could accept personal checks.
Yeah.
As long as they send them on time and everything's good to go, and you just deposit them in your account. Even that simple of a method is you can do if needed.
Yeah, in fact, personal checks work just great with this. It's one of the few businesses, where you could take something like personal checks, but you're able to do that because you're never transferring title until the property's paid for, and therefore you can sit on a check and wait for it to clear. And so there's no risk. There's no risk of losing anything. So therefore, personal checks would also work. And the other thing that you'll want to be aware of is any requirements that the state's going to have when it does come time to transfer, transfer ownership. Because when that occurs, the state is going to have their own type of, they'll have a quitclaim deed, but it's going to be unique to that state. They're not necessarily all the same across the board. So you want to have the correct tool to transfer ownership is essentially really what it's about. And you'll want to know what the process is that the county requires in order to record that. So, the county may say, that you basically just have to, each sign this form and it doesn't have to be notarized. Or maybe it does have to be notarized. It all depends on where you're working. So really setting up seller financing doesn't take that much work. There's not that many things you really have to do, and the sales contract is not overly complicated. Because you're not the bank, I think you can have a little more flexibility in how you offer these things. But you definitely want to get a contract with people that want to buy, and I think the more professional you can try to be with them, I think the easier it will be to collect money.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
All right, so here's one that we could look at with the question: would this property be a good property to sell as is, or would this be a good property to do a rehab on first? And why don't we just look at what we would consider with a property like this? Now, based on some numbers we came up with here, let's say that that the market value on the property is $54,000. Okay, you look it up, and on Zillow, it looks like properties in the neighborhood sell for about $54,000, or it looks like it's estimated at about $54,000. Now, you are able to pick this property up. Let's say you can pick it up for $13,000. And based on some things on it, let's say that you look at it and you can tell that one of the things it's going to need is a new roof, and it's going to need paint inside the house. And based on square footage and what the handyman tells you, that's going to cost you about $6,000. You've also got a couple $100 in taxes and other fees. So you've got a little bit in the holding cost there, and then there's the cost of quiet title, you'd say, giving you a total cost, if you were to attempt to rehab this property, of somewhere in the neighborhood of $21,000. And so the question would be, which one are you better off, pursuing as you start to look at this? And what you find is that one of the big factors that plays a role here in deciding is the duration. The duration is one of the major factors. It's also about how much money is going out. Because again, if $13,000 was a lot to spend for it, keep in mind you're going to have to put an additional $7,000 plus into it in order to get it fixed up, and your money's going to be tied up over a 7-month plus duration of time.
Yeah, exactly. And so looking at the profit, over 30 days, if we sold it just with wholesale value, you're going to make about $13,000 versus 7 months where you're going to make about $23,000. So you essentially, make about an extra $10,000, but it's going to take 6 months worth of time.
Yeah, and And when you consider it like that, then suddenly it becomes a little bit clearer, and it's easier to say, oh, well, this makes way more sense just to turn around and flip and make the quick 13,000 on than to try to hang on to it for 6 or 7 months. But what you'll find though is as that property value increases, so if it was, rather than being 54,000, if it's worth 94,000, then suddenly the numbers change, and it may take an additional 7 months, but it's $40,000 more profit.
And instead of making 23, you're making 53.
Mm-hmm.
Or 63.
And that's where it makes more sense. You can say, okay, well, I would rather not tie up my money for 6 or 7 months, but I'll do it for $50,000.
Yeah.
That's where the numbers start to make more sense to you. And so, it's one of the ways that you can decide. But every time you look at a property, this part of what you're going to be considering here is what's going to be, the best route. And what you may find is that you're doing the same thing over and over again with all the properties. You might find you don't want to do rehabs on anything, or you might find that rehabs are all you want to do. You only want to figure out the ones that that you can do rehabs on. So, there are a lot of things to consider, I think, when you're trying to determine how much it's going to cost. Estimating the repair cost too, just to be totally upfront, it's pretty difficult to do without gaining access to the property. Even then, it's only so accurate because you're doing it from the exterior of the home, and you're doing a lot of guesswork. So there's also always a risk inherent there that you've missed something, or that things inside are worse than you thought.
Yeah, that's the reason we always recommend putting as much being as conservative as possible, or putting as much room in there in the repair cost, so that if anything happens or there is any type of thing that comes up, you're good to go.
Yeah,
you're not going to be losing any money.
Yeah, I think it's always better to be prepared for the worst, rather than surprised by it. Let me just grab and pull this up here. Now, why don't we take a look? There are a ton of sales and things taking place right now. There we go. Here, let me switch this over. Oh, where is my thing at here? There we go, very top. Okay. There we go. Now, if you want to see, tell us a little bit about what we're looking at.
Well, this is the Douglas County, Nebraska sale, and it's probably just wrapping up. So let's go ahead and preview items for sale and still see.
No, they just barely held it, didn't they?
Yeah.
Just today or yesterday?
Yeah, well, it was finished up on the 7th. So
we'll see. Here's one for the 9th. So this one is one in actually in St. Mary's County, Maryland. And again, starts on the 9th here in just a couple of days.
And this is actually going to be held at the county courthouse. So this one in Maryland, the one we were just looking at, was an online in Douglas. But this one's going to be held at the county courthouse. So, if you live near Maryland, this is usually when you have a live tax sale, it's usually a pretty good opportunity to get some pretty good tax liens.
Yeah.
But when looking on the list, we can see just kind of some basic information about the property. Address, owner, account number, the assessment, and the tax due. And so really we're going to be looking at that assessment amount versus the tax due to determine which kind of tax liens we want to look at.
Yeah, and really a good portion of what we need to know before buying liens is kind of right here in front of us, which is, the taxes due versus the assessed value. And then, there's a link to property records, but we can see that, with the $2,000 amount, 1997 owed in taxes, and an $82,000 assessed value, that it's a secure investment. That it's a safe investment because your $2,000 is secured by nearly $100,000 in real estate.
Yeah, we can also see which properties have addresses and which ones don't, which means that they're going to be more likely to be single-family homes, the ones that addresses versus the ones that don't.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that not having an address makes it a bad investment. We can see lots on here that very well could be a great piece of land as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's take a look here. There are so many different sales that are taking place.
Citrus. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, we're looking at Citrus County here in Florida with an online tax deed auction, and we're looking at 21st.
Yeah.
Now these lists are the best, I think, especially for new members. You know, if you are not that familiar with going through tax sale lists, these are my favorite kind to learn on because they were all similar. Everything, you know, from real auction has this same look to it. And it makes the information very accessible, easy to read at a glance. So any of these that we're looking at here initially, we're going to pass right over these because the bid to value ratio isn't anywhere near what we want it to be. You know, you've got a $2,000 assessed value and $3,000 opening bid. It tells you that there's something wrong with the property. It's junk land, basically, toxic.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of these are going to be different types of lots, but essentially they've had so many property taxes against them that the amount has just gone up quite a bit high. And so we'll just scan through those until we get into around page 3, page 4. We're going to start getting into some properties that have more value.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of these are there so far. And here, right here, is where we begin to see a difference. Is starting right here. We've got an $8,000 opening bid amount versus an $84,000 assessed value, and we've got a physical address here on the property, as well as links here to.
That's the other one.
Oh yeah, I did click on the wrong one here. Now, having a direct link to the property record like this is such a time saver.
On the left-hand side, we can click on photos and maps or anything about the property to help us get additional information.
Yeah, so what we can do right here, this pulls up. I wonder if that pictometry. Oh, here, this one will give us.
So that one there is just a lot.
Yeah, this one is a lot. We can see.
But it has high value.
Yeah, it does have high value. It's a pretty good sized lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's in an area that appears to have like newer construction still takes place here.
Well, you see, it's got big homes out here. It's probably like, big 2 to 5 acre lots with big homes on it.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be a great one here. Especially considering that it's just raw land. It doesn't have the added.
So if you were an out-of-state investor, that'd be something you could look at.
Yeah, as an out-of-state investor, the raw land's always going to be easier to pick up.
Now, one thing we want to look at real quick is this one right here. The reason why the opening bid is so high is because that's what we call a homestead property. And so in Florida, not a lot of the properties are homestead properties, but what homestead does is it gives them an opportunity to get a discount on their taxes, and also if they do get foreclosed on, they have to. Essentially, the opening bid starts at 50% of assessed value. But even in these type of deals, many times some of these properties can actually be quite profitable, even though the assessed value is high. Because if the market value on this property is, let's say, it's worth 150, well, that could completely change, the investment itself.
Yeah. So this one, in fact, even though that the numbers seem like they wouldn't work, I'll bet that even as is, the numbers probably work just great.
You'd be a little bit higher on the end, but even then you're looking at 181,000.
Yeah, it's valued at 181,000. It's the value is certainly there and strong enough to. It's double what the assessed is.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you get that big of a difference between the assessed value and the actual value, it always increases overall profitability when you can get that kind of stretch.
Part of the reason that homestead has probably kept that assessed value down as well, But even that one there, 3,000, 32,000. I don't know what this property is. Maybe it's a lot. Maybe it's something different. But that's the bid to value ratio that we want to look at.
Well, it looks like it's a double wide.
I wouldn't be surprised if the Zillow value is higher than that as well. But there you're looking at a $3,000 opening bid, $3,100 opening bid, and then really that trailer looks to be a newer trailer. It's on its own piece of ground, so essentially it's a single family home valued at 45 grand.
Yeah.
3-bedroom, 2-bath.
Yeah, it would be and the rent estimate of $900 a month. That's the other thing that's strong in these areas is the estimated rent amounts. We're always checking that out, that rent number, because it could certainly affect where you may want to invest if you're trying to create income properties. Obviously, the higher that rent amount is, the more potential you have to make money there with it every month. And in some places, rent is you won't find too many places where rent is super cheap. There are some places we'll come across where rent, rather than being $900, it's closer to $500 or $600. That's usually about as cheap as you can find. Most rent seems to start out at about $600 to $700.
Yeah. Well, and overall, this is a newer trailer built in 1989, big, larger, almost 1,300 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Overall, you're looking at a great investment.
Yeah. It looks like we've got quite a few more here. Again, more of these where the numbers just don't quite work, but they're closer.
Yeah, so the one for 14, you could actually look at it and see what the lot is if you wanted, but there's a lot more properties on this list than with single family homes. And, there's one for $6,000, $72,000 opening bid. $72,000 says value, $6,500 opening bid.
Yeah, which this one looks like tenants in common. This is a single family residential. Yeah.
That's a nice home.
Yeah, this would be another great one here, that's starting off at a pretty low price, starting out at $6,500, valued at $72,000 according to the county, but maybe the county's wrong across the board here by that much.
Well, there's just so much of this Florida real estate that's just, increasing in value. $127,000, $1,100 a month rent for that.
Yeah, which lots of potential there. On that property. It would be worth bidding that up to, if the property's condition, when was this photo taken? 2014. So
it's pretty clean.
Yeah, it does look pretty clean.
It's about as clean as you get.
Yeah.
For an old, for a property.
For a tax deed. Yeah, that is true. 3,000 to 8,000. Here's another one that is most likely a
homestead.
Homestead property right here, and we know that just because we can see that the opening bid amount. I'm not sure exactly how they come up with the numbers, but when it's pretty much 50%
taxes. So
Yeah, there's probably like 8,000 in taxes. Let's see. Yeah, let's see here. Yeah, it's another house here. That's a 2010 photo. Of the house. Interesting. We've got a lot of good property there. There's another one right down below it. That's another homestead. And let's see here. We've got
2,700, 34,000.
Yeah.
It's probably a trailer. That next one down is probably a trailer, 2,000. If it's a lot, those could actually be very good lots. The higher priced lots within these areas are really nice lots, usually on the water. Could really be some pretty good investments.
Yeah, in fact, tell us here pretty quickly. Single family, so this is probably a trailer. Let's take a look here.
That's a little house.
Yeah, it is. It is a little house. And there's a couple of those here. See if this one's another house here too. And this one's a mobile home. It tells us here. We can see that up here under the PC code under 200.
And it is nice when they have photos here. This one, we can't see too much from the photo here. You know, I'm sure we could always get a better look if we wanted, but you know, any of these starting out at $2,000, you know, they've got pretty good profitability.
That's vacant land.
Yeah, that one is vacant land. It's a lot. $4,000 versus a $32,000 opening bid. I mean, value. Yeah, this one's a mobile home. Looks like a commercial on a half acre.
$58,000 in 2006.
Yeah, it looks like it's sitting on a half acre. So it's a double wide.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, it's a double wide on a foundation. It looks like, or possibly on something like that. Yeah, in fact, any of those, you know, would work. You know, it's amazing as you start to get into to these properties. This one's some kind of commercial piece.
Yeah, store, $6,000 opening bid. Oh wow.
Yeah, it's a little gift and thrift shop here.
That's actually pretty sweet.
Yeah, that would be.
I'll bet the rents on those are pretty good. Commercial, you know, rental.
Yeah, I'll bet it would be too. Yeah, and it's in. So that's the area that it's in. It looks like it's in the downtown area. You know, of Iverness. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. And I like little communities like this. You know, little places like towns, communities like this.
Grab the whole address.
Yeah, here I'll. Yeah, so we can see it's right here off this main interstate, or this highway here, north and southbound. And we can see it right here. It looks like a pretty good sized building. Or is it attached to another building? Let's take a look. Oh yeah, you can see that it's attached to an auto shop. It's interesting. I'd love to get both halves of that.
Yeah, I wonder if the other half is coming up for sale.
I don't know. It could be. You know, so the image we're looking at right here is actually January 2017. So this is a pretty recent image that we're looking at here of the property. You know, that would give us. I mean, it's you know, about a year old, and
yeah.
So you know, the condition's probably relatively close to what we're seeing here.
Well, and Frank's Auto Service still seems to be in service, so you know, I'm sure that at least means that there's an open business next door that's at least keeping an eye out on it.
Yeah.
In fact, if Frank knows about it, he's probably going to show up at the auction if he's not the owner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would.
I could see that happening. Which sometimes, you know, you it's good to pay attention. You know, when one of the nice things about attending the sales live is that you know exactly who you're bidding against, and so it teaches you a little bit, or tells you a little bit about what their motives are and what they want to do. When you're online, you know, you don't quite get that same interaction, so it's just a matter of, you know, picking your price. But live sales are good for that. Yeah, really good. Well, let's see here. You know, I'm just thinking here, if there's any questions, you know, we can take questions here if anybody has them. You know, otherwise we'll probably wrap it up here, and you know, so we can get the recording out for everybody. So, thank you so much. Hey, we love you guys. We love doing this, and we love helping you. So, let us know whatever it is that we can do to help. We know that a lot of you are really serious about this. You want to make money doing it, and we would love to help you do that. Also, just for all the mentoring students, mentoring is a ton of fun. You know, really, we really enjoy it. We love the chance to get to know all you guys, and it's been fun helping you buy things, and it's fun helping you sell things now. You know, and so we're just really enjoying it. You know, we think we finally kind of figured out the best way to do mentoring, and it's constantly evolving. But you know, it's been exciting.
But you don't have to have mentoring in order to buy. You know, again, you can do all this stuff on your own. It's certainly all there within your power. But if there's anything we can do to help you, please let us know.
Absolutely. You guys have a great week, and we'll talk to you again next week.
See you later.